This is great. This is good.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was my idea.
Is this panel themed at all, or is this just the Chris and Jason hour?
I feel like it's the big almost empty room except for a few loyal fans panel. I appreciate that.
There you go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I did think I think I did see My Hero on the website.
All right, so let's talk.
We can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've heard of that show.
But you can ask anything you want.
What is your favorite character you've ever voiced?
Wow.
That's a hard decision. Do you have an answer for that?
Well, I'm fond of a certain purple cat that really loves to eat, nap, and destroy.
It's unfair to not include Dragon Ball in that list, but Vegeta hurts my voice a lot, so he kind of punishes me whenever I have to voice him. So, and it's not just because this is a My Hero Academia panel, but All Might is really meaningful to me because I've got two young girls. I've got an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old at home, and it really makes me think a lot about like what skills I'm passing on to them. So it sort of hit me at the perfect time to have a character like that. He's really endearing.
I didn't prep a question for Mr. Douglas. Sorry, this man Chris.
Oh, we'll let you stand there until you think of a question for Jason.
First time I heard your voice was on a show called Sergeant Frog where you played Gororo. What was your favorite part of like that whole project?
Oh, that is so funny. Like, this is the second mention of Gororo in an hour. Somebody just came up earlier and handed me like a picture she had drawn of Gororo. That was a show. It was really, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it was a show called Sergeant Frog. Were you doing work with Funimation yet at that point?
I don't recall doing that show.
That was the old Funimation building.
Yep.
Joel McDonald directed it, and it was about these frogs that from another planet, and they were sent to Earth to destroy it, but for whatever reason, the mothership left without them, and they were just sort of stuck on Earth, and it was just 5 frogs or whatever. And I played this really militant one called Giroro, and he was just this really angry dude, but who was desperately in love with, like, I don't know, the girl who lived in the house. Natsumi, that's what it was. And it was really fun because Todd Haberkorn was amazing in that. Chuck Huber was great in that too. Brina Palencia played this really dumb one, and like it was such a fun show. The cast was fun, and it was one of those shows where I thought, oh, I'm going to introduce this to my kids because I remember this being like whimsical and fun. And then I was watching a couple episodes with them and went, oh, wait a minute, hold on, this is not what I thought it was. This is like way more adult than I remembered it being. So it was fun. It was awesome. Thank you for bringing it up.
I got one for you too, actually.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you were able to pull something out of your pocket there, pal.
You have a lot of like crazy voice lines as Krieg. What would you say is your favorite one?
Oh boy.
One you think of.
Oh God. Well, you know, I do have the shiniest meat bicycle. There's that. You know, it's weird when they ask you to do when fans ask you to do lines, and it's an interesting thing because Chris and I have been doing this for a very long time, and of course we never memorized our lines in the first place, right? So sometimes we find out that things that we've done are resonating in a way that we didn't expect, and a lot of times I meet fans that know my lines better than I do, you know, that have lines kind of memorized. But whenever I get that question, I always feel like I gotta go home and do some studying so that I'm ready for this. So, but I love doing. I love Krieg as a character, but I definitely am feeling it in the throat whenever I'm done with a session because it's literally bloody. I mean, it causes that kind of effect. So, anyway,
that's definitely one of those characters that you get that you're like, yes, I'm on Borderlands. I've got a main character, and then you find out like, oh yeah, by the way, you got to scream all the time. Like, second to Torg or whoever, Chris Rager's character, sure. I can't even imagine. What his life is like. That's a tough one.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hello. So for each of you, which? Closer. Just want to make sure they can hear you.
Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. So for each of you, which qualities do you prefer in a voice director?
Well, that's actually a good question.
Yeah,
that's
is.
a really nice question. Thanks for that. Qualities in a voice director. And the reason that's a good question is because a lot of directors in general, but this includes some voice directors, is that they're doing a very technical job, and sometimes they have a very specific idea of what they think they need, and then the job for them becomes communicating that well to the talent. For me, as on the talent side, on the actor side, the directors that I really like working with are the ones that have often been actors, or they kind of speak the actor's language, or they know how to talk to the actors in order to help them feel creative, like they're part of the process. I always bring up working with Ian Sinclair on Black Butler because he was able to help, I think, coax a performance out of me that would have been fine had it been someone else. But I think with Ian, I think we brought it to another level, and I think that's because, again, he was himself an actor. So that's my answer. What do you think?
Yeah, that I of all the years, I don't think I've ever been asked that question. That is an amazing question. The best. Because I've done my fair share of voice directing too, and I learned. So I have a lot of sympathy, especially on younger voice directors, because I went through the same phases they did, which was when you first become a voice director, there is a lot of pressure on you. Everyone stares at you when the line is done or you've finished recording something, and everyone stares at you, and it's your job to go like, I like that, or I didn't like it, and here's why I didn't like it, and engineer, do this thing to it to make it work. And it comes with a lot of, there can be a little bit of a panic with it, because you think, I mean, this has got to be right. And so when you first do it, all you can imagine is the line that's in your head. When you hear someone read something, and if it doesn't match what you hear in your head, that's the only voice you think you can trust at that point, because you're nervous. And I went through a phase. I actually remember a very specific actor that I worked with. His name was Brad Jackson, and he was an Oolong and also King Cold in Dragon Ball. And I remember this one line delivery that he had, and he was like, no, wait, please, you can't, please, I'm defenseless. And in my head, I heard him going, what I wanted was, no, wait, no, please, you can't, wait, please, I'm defenseless, or whatever. That's what I was hearing in my head. He went the opposite direction. He was like, no, wait, you please can't, I'm defenseless, or something like that. And in my mind, I was like, that's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. So I just kept beating him over the head with trying to get what I wanted. And then when I went back and we were mixing it, I realized he had the best idea. His sounded better than mine. So the voice directors I like are voice directors who don't try to take the creativity out of the session too. A great voice director is somebody who keeps the spirit alive in the room, doesn't mess with people's egos, and really trust the actor to do the right thing. Because if you cast something correctly, if you pick the right voices, you really don't have to tell these actors much of anything besides what's going on in the scene and anything special that might inform what they're doing at that moment. So yeah, there are great voice directors who, I'm trying to think, like Colleen Klinkenbeard is amazing. She's a fantastic director. She's the director of My Hero, and she plays Momo, because she's such a great actress herself. And she does an excellent job directing, because it's a nice mix of letting you do something, and then she just corrects something in it that she might like. She might tweak something, but she's not afraid to go back and say, you know what, that first take was great. I'm going to go back and use that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. How's it going, Ethan?
Good to see you.
It's going good so far, I think.
That's great. So, out of any of the series you guys were voice acting, what would you say would be your favorite or your best work that you did?
Start on that one, because I have to.
Yeah. So I'm just going to draw a big line under Beerus and get that out of the way, because I'm so fond of that character and I'm still in it. But it's like the cheesy answer, like is Beerus the answer to every question? But I started doing anime in 1998. And there have been a lot of forgotten shows that I still think about when I think about shows that I've done that I like. But you know, I was telling somebody about a show the other day, and again, a lot of times these are characters that I don't often get a chance to play. So when I did a show called Hugo the Negotiator, and it was about a guy that was literally a hostage negotiator. It's very dramatic. You know, it would have been a 1-hour AMC drama if they were to make a live action version of it. And so that was super cool. And then there was some other projects. Louis the Rune Soldier was this big sort of swords and sandals fantasy show that I did back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I just remember them because they were fun. Those are the shows that jump out to me, are the ones that I remember having fun doing. So I could probably give you a laundry. Come by my table and I'll give you a list of shows to look at.
Yeah, it's always hard to kind of catalog them in your mind, because they don't say, Chris, you're going to work on show X and you're going to work on it in 2 weeks, and here's your character and this is what it's about, and here's where you can find all the material to research it and watch the show. Usually we have the same agent, we'll get a message from them going like, they want you tomorrow for a show, and we walk in and they say this is the show, and go. There's not always a lot of time to prepare for things. Sometimes on the bigger stuff, like I think Beerus, he actually had a little bit of time on that to kind of get used to it. And with All Might, I had a little bit of time to start reading the manga before I started recording. I think there is some really good work, I think, that happened in All Might. Some of his scenes, maybe because it's the one show I've cried the most performing on, because it's just such a sad, like it's such a heartwarming show. Trying to think, and all I can think of are the fun shows I worked on. And it's not my best work at all, but there was a show called Pop Team Epic. Did any of you all see that show? I'm sure you were on it.
I think I did, yeah, for sure.
Which were you, the blonde one or the brunette? Do you remember?
I want to say maybe the brunette.
I don't know. It's the weirdest show. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a show where it starts off and it's like these two girls, and they're at the beginning of each episode, they're played by two voice actors. It gets halfway through, it rewinds like in the middle of the show, and then it's replaced by two female voice actors. So it's like two males first, two females after it, and it's a bizarre show. Let's see, what's another show? I'm trying to think of another show that I really liked working on. There was an old show, and it was probably, this sticks in my mind, and I haven't watched it in a long time. It may not actually be very good at all, but it was the first show that Funimation sent to my studio that wasn't Dragon Ball related, and it was a show called Salty Ray. I don't know if anyone ever saw that old show, and it was just about this like grizzled kind of detective who lost his daughter or something, and then like this girl sort of falls from the sky. She ends up being kind of a robot, but he was dealing with a lot of issues of like loss and like I think alcoholism. They weren't too clear about it, but that was a show where I got to direct myself on it, and I remember I was harder on myself on that show than I was on any actor I've ever worked with, because I was really getting in my own head about it. But I want to believe I did an okay job on that one. Thanks.
All right, so I have one more question.
Go for it, please. We got all the time in the world.
So both of you being like veteran voice actors for however long you guys have been, I know it's kind of corny to ask this, but would you recommend being into the voice acting industry?
No. You asked me if I would recommend it. Now, I would give you advice if you asked for advice, but it's tough business. I mean, I think it's very misunderstood about what it is that we do and how we kind of make our livings doing it. And so I'm a dad. Chris is a dad, and so we often think about things like, what would we want our kids to be able to have access to or to do in life, and voice acting for us, at least for me, started out as just one segment of the career that I had chosen, which was to be an actor. And even if you were just to say to me, would you recommend acting? I would say, well, I would ask you a lot of questions in response, right? Before I would say, yes, I would recommend it for you. Here's, I guess, a better way of putting it. I don't recommend it as a blanket thing. I don't say, hey, it's for everybody, because honestly, there's not enough jobs to go around for literally everybody. But if you're passionate, you're driven, and you've got some artistic, some creative, performative, performance talent, why not explore it? Especially if you're young. I always say, an acting class or an improv class are excellent sort of life-building exercises, whether or not you go into acting or an acting-related field, that can just make you a better, more expressive person, a little more comfortable in your skin, a little more comfortable, talking in front of a group or whatnot. So, is it worth exploring? Yeah, why not? But as far as becoming a professional voice actor, there's a lot of, conversation and introspection that I think a person needs to have before they just kind of run headlong into it. Like, I'm going to do that for a living. I think it's there's just a lot to consider about what you want out of life and what that looks like. So does that make sense? I don't know if that was a good answer or not.
And Jason's is coming to you with this, as I understand it, your degree was in theater, correct?
I was a theater major in college.
Yeah. I was not. I was vocal performance, and I was radio, television, film, and I was on the tech side mostly because I loved tinkering with recording, and I loved tinkering with making sounds. And I would say that it is, I would agree with everything he said. It's very, very difficult, especially now. Like, when we stumbled into it, we were just having this conversation last night. When we stumbled into voice acting, it wasn't something we were doing because we knew how much it meant to fans or anything like that. We just did it because it's kind of cool. Like, okay, what is this? Like, this is something to keep your voice fresh, keep you doing things. It was better than sitting around waiting for an audition or something to come in. So, but if I could give you a little bit of insight into kind of where I see a person who wants to get into this industry, it is to keep your eyes open and see open as many doors as you possibly can. So what I usually encourage people to do, on top of taking acting classes or improv classes, is expose yourself to the production world. Because one thing you could technically do sooner than later, and I'm not sure that everybody would, not everyone loves this job, is to be a production assistant on a film. Depends on where you live, but you can get down on the ground floor to just watch what people do in an industry, get an internship somewhere, or work and watch people do what they do. Because one thing I found over the years, because I haven't done a ton of stage acting or film acting, but I have done some commercial work, and when I was on a commercial set once, I realized there's something called the art department, and I didn't even know that job existed. And all of a sudden, like, it resonated with me so much that I thought, man, if I could go back in time, I would have tried to be in an art department on a film set. So there's just all these jobs in the entertainment field that most people aren't even remotely aware of. So I would say, make voice acting, if you want to do that, the center of the very dartboard, but throw as many darts as you can, and definitely do something that can make you money on the side, because you don't make a ton of it as a voice actor.
Well, it's nice seeing you two. I really appreciate your time answering my questions.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
For a panel that had only like 8 people in line for questions, they've all been the best questions.
They're great. Yeah.
Oh, you again. Happy birthday, by the way. It's her birthday today.
So you guys have been doing this forever, so I don't know if you guys still have to audition for roles or if you just get called in for them. But whether you're going for one or being given one, how do you decide what voice you want to use for a character?
Yeah, good question. The first part of your question is sometimes I do and sometimes I don't audition. Occasionally I get, somebody wants you for this role and I'm like, okay, tell me where to show up. Chainsaw Man, incidentally, came through as a blanket audition, and I just thought, I really like this character. So I participated from the from the audition process, and Mike selected me to play the role. So that's the first part. Second part for me, I don't know about it for you, Chris. I don't know. When I'm reading a script, I just sort of feel a character. And that's the thing. If I connect with a character, then I feel it. It starts to bubble up, and he starts to assert himself as a character coming out of my mouth, right? So it's often useful to just be like, well, how would I do it if it were just me and without affecting the voice at all? But there's a lot that goes into a voice. It's not just kind of changing the timbre of your voice, but it's often the energy that your character has. So like if I think of like Gildarts is really just my voice, but with a really manic energy. He's always kind of like this. It's way more. I'm very low key and mostly droll in real life, but so a lot of characters are just. And it's like looking at the reading, looking at the script. What's the pacing? What does the script tell you about this character? So, there's a lot that happens, and then that final 10% crossing the finish line is usually when you're with the director, the ADR director, and they're and as well as the engineer, and you're just kind of bouncing that around. And you're like, yeah, I think we're in a good place. Let's continue with this. So.
Yeah, same answer on the first part. Sometimes Funimation is just they're such a factory because they've got 12 booths running constantly, and so on any time you go up to record on something, there's usually another director that needs something from somebody that day, and it might be just a minor character, and maybe a major character that they aren't even aware of, because in these simuldub type productions, they don't even know if a character is going to stick around or not. So yeah, I don't audition for a lot of stuff at Funimation, but I think that's starting to change. The way that Chainsaw Man kind of went down, I think they sent out a lot of auditions for that, and I think a lot of people listen to them to kind of make those decisions. As far as creating a voice, it's kind of goes along with what he said as well. I think as somebody who likes to do this, as someone who wants to be a voice actor, you almost have this kind of gut instinct about it. You just sort of can see it, and I think that's what distinguishes somebody who really wants to be a voice actor and doesn't. It's like you start with the obvious things, like how old is the person, like how tall are they, or like do they have any sort of obvious like physical feature that you can kind of tie into, and then the rest of it really is about energy and pacing and timing and acting and making interesting choices. Because there's a lot of what directors want to hear when they're, I believe what directors want to hear in auditions is people who are not necessarily taking the most obvious path, people who are doing something unique or different with it. And I don't mean by doing something trick with their voice or anything. It just could be a clever way of reading lines or inserting something into the character that they hadn't thought of. So, I don't know. And then the rest of it is when you show up for the session, they kind of, a lot of times you get cast on it, and they'll just, at least this, when I'm directing something, I'll usually let people just roll on it for a while, just record, just like as soon as they come in, like, you know what, you were auditioning, here's your audition, let's just start recording so you can see this character kind of in motion and hear some of the lines around it so you can get a better feel. And then once you finally get to that place where you're like, oh yeah, that's it, then you go back and check and see how different it was from where you started, maybe start it over again and then re-record it. Everybody has their own methods of doing it, and I'm sure there's somewhere that you could read about lots of different methods to do it, but I don't know what they are. Cool. When are you heading back? When are you heading home?
Probably in an hour. I'm asking my husband.
Okay. Well, I had something for you because I knew it was your birthday, so make sure and stop by my table because I had something authenticated for you. She is a phenomenal cosplayer. She comes to see me all the time, and yesterday she played out the joke that's been in my head forever that I didn't even tell her existed, and she was dressed as Zorro and Zorro. She was dressed as Zorro from One Piece, but also with the hat and the mask and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And are you Vegeta today? Saiyan God of Destruction. Fair enough. It's terrific. Yeah.
I left it shoulder pad.
No worries. It's really good.
Thank you.
I think all of the Saiyans should have left their shoulder pads at home, frankly. I don't know how they walked around the ship, because they would always have to kind of walk to the side or whatever. Yeah. It just doesn't seem like great battle armor.
They're just really protective of their shoulders. You know? Thanks.
Take care. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, like, how did y'all get into the voice acting industry at first, or like the anime industry in general?
Both of us, I think, I'm going to say it was probably similar. We started when the two companies that we worked for were relatively young companies, where they were just happy to have anybody who could speak lines that and sound decent on them. So I was studying radio, television, film at school. I was friends with somebody who worked for a little company, and her job was she was a rotoscoper. She would take animation and frame by frame take bits out of it that aren't supposed to be there, like were inappropriate, like when panties fall from the sky in Dragon Ball, or like Master Roshi's drinking beer but you can't put that on TV, so they turn it into grape juice or whatever. I always thought it was the coolest job, and one day she came to me and she said, "Hey, you do like voice stuff, don't you?" And I'm like, "Well, I did radio, but I haven't done a ton of like character work or anything like that." She goes, "Well, you should come audition for this company. It's a tiny little company called Funimation, and we're just doing these auditions for this show." So I went up, auditioned, or when I initially auditioned, we were kind of copying if you guys remember when you were really young, there was this Canadian cast that existed on the show for about the first 60 episodes or so, and then they just repeated forever while nothing was being produced. And so our job initially was to kind of copy those voices, and it turned out to be Dragon Ball, and that was my first ever voice acting gig. And it was crazy that it's weird that you get the best gig you could ever possibly get as your first one, and I'm very grateful for that. So, and then I just sat around Funimation while the anime industry kind of built itself up around me. And then now there's just Anime City, and I'm still in the same place going, wow, man, these buildings are big now.
Yeah, similar story for me. I was a stage actor actually in Houston, and I had a friend of mine who was doing a little bit of work with a company called ADV Films. It said, "Hey, they're having an audition for they have these general auditions every couple of months. You should come check it out." And I immediately got cast. The director had seen me in a play recently, and they cast me in a little OVA called Kimaguri Orange Road, Summer's Beginning, which most folks wouldn't remember. It was also Jessica Calvello's, I think, first show, as well as a mutual friend of ours in the business. And it just started there. And, like Chris said earlier, when we started, we weren't looking to become voice actors, really. We weren't looking to become anime voice actors. And most of us weren't necessarily anime fans. We were just actors, and it was a fun opportunity to, use our acting skills and to... almost bless you, yeah. That's it. The beginnings were very. It was almost like, what is this? What are we even embarking on? This is this weird genre, or this interesting media that doesn't pay very well, but it's just kind of fun to go spend a couple of hours a week doing these characters. And I don't know how it was in Funimation, but ADV would send us couple of VHS copies of our work. Every time we would record something, we would end up getting a VHS of whatever the show was that we were doing. And that was it. I mean, maybe those shows barely even got distributed early on. But yeah, then there was a big explosion in interest, and we just kind of rode the wave of that. So
plus there was a giant gap between the time it was released in Japan and the time when we recorded it, and then the time when you may have ever seen it. Because back in those days, you would record it, and it would take months for them to process it and turn it into a videotape and then get it distributed in a store. I remember in Dragon Ball, we probably recorded 50 episodes before I think anything got on television, to my knowledge. back in those days, we weren't meeting fans at conventions. Back in those days, there were only these niche, small anime conventions, and they didn't like me very much because we were the evil American company that was coming in and changing all the names from Makanko Sapo to Special Beam Cannon, which wasn't my decision, but still, we were on it. So normally panels were actually kind of closer to about half this size, and most of the questions were, Mr. Sabat, why did you ruin the music for Dragon Ball? I'm like, it wasn't my choice. And why did you change why did you change this line here? I'm like, I really don't know, man. And so I didn't realize what sort of impact we had on the people who were watching it and the people who were. Especially compared to now, we record something and a week later it's on television, and then a week after that we're at a convention and we get to meet people who give you instant feedback on it, which is insane.
Thanks, man.
Howdy.
Hi, how are you?
So, I have 2 questions for you. Both
Love it.
of them are going to be awesome.
I'm sure they
I have
are.
high hopes now.
So, what inspired you guys to do voice acting for characters or for do acting for characters?
That's a unique question. I might want to ask you to kind of refine that a little bit. Are you asking like what made us want to be voice actors instead of like film or stage actors or something like that? Is that what you're?
Let's put it simply. What inspired you guys to voice act for characters like, how did you guys do it?
I think the same thing that inspired me for voice acting is the same thing that inspired me for all acting. It's a career that's fun to do. You get into it because you love it, or voice acting is just a form of acting, really. Anime dubbing is definitely unique because you're kind of replacing something that already exists. And over the years, as we've gotten better at it, I actually really love anime dubbing in a lot of ways because you have the music and the sound effects in your ear, and if you're one of the later people to record, all the other actors are already on it. And so imagine how much you love these shows. Well, we get to hear it in our ear, and then we get to like insert ourselves into it. We get to be a part of it. So a lot of times the Japanese performances are inspiring, the music is inspiring, the sound effects, everything you're seeing visually is very inspiring. And it's a very unique thing to anime specifically, because in other types of animation like prelay or video games, sometimes you don't get to see what you did until it's done. So it's a lot of it's in your imagination, and sometimes I don't know if you've ever played a game or seen something you've worked on. You're like, oh, if I'd have known they were like standing on this hill, I probably would have called the line out a little bit more or something like that. So the beautiful thing about anime is it's all there, and it's just it's kind of like fitting a creative puzzle piece into the puzzle.
Yes. And do you have any tips or any ideas for somebody who wants to do voice acting in the future?
Well, it's kind of a lot of what we have said earlier about just the career in general. You need to be trained. I mean, anyone that wants to do what we do, I think, if you respect the craft, you'll put yourself through. You give yourself several years where you are in acting classes, improv classes, where you're studying what does it mean to be a voice actor? What does it mean to be an actor in general? I mean, most of the advice that I give folks who say, how do I become a voice actor? I say, well, do you want to be an actor? I mean, or have you done any acting at school or elsewhere? Because voice actors typically are actors. And for the most part, when they're, you have to imagine it as well from the casting side, they want to be able to cast people not just based on, wow, you've got a unique voice, but it's also, can you put that voice into these characters and make the characters come to life? Can you be believable as that character? And so it's really helpful to gain confidence by training before you put yourself in that position, right? Because, I might say to you, hey, you've got a great voice. I'd like you to read for this character. But if you've never read for a character before, if you don't know how to cold read, if you don't know how to make choices as an actor that are interesting and true, then we'll be putting the cart before the horse, if you know the expression, right? Does it make sense?
And just imagine, though, here you are, you've got your first audition, you managed to get in the door somewhere, or maybe you're even cast as something, and it's not just like it's even more nerve-wracking than you might imagine, because not only are you having to perform for the first time or perform in a way that you've never been asked to before, you've got headphones on and your voice is really loud in your ears. So I usually tell people, if you are interested in being a narrator or using your voice, learn to record yourself really well at home. Learn to see learn what you sound like and become used to what you sound like. You shouldn't actually be disgusted by, embarrassed by your own voice. You should just understand what your own voice is, because a majority of people, like he said earlier, they're not cast on their ability to do a Homer Simpson impression or something like that, which is kind of a common misconception about what voice acting is. A lot of times they're just cast on their own voice and their ability to act within that realm. And Jason and I are both lucky in that we have uniquely low voices, and there are less of those in our industry. So we are lucky that we can kind of get cast a little bit more than other people. Although anime has so many high-pitched boy voices, I usually look at anime, like the audition sides, and go, nope, that's Todd Haberkorn. Nope, that's Eric Vale. Nope, that is, that's Justin Briner's audition. Mm-hmm. Nope, I'm not going to read for any of these because I'm not in high school. So, I don't know. I recommend you find a community, maybe, of people who also like to do it. I know that Justin Briner, who's young Midoriya in My Hero Academia, he and I think Kellen Goff and Clifford Chapin, they were all part of some online group where they shared, shared and rated each other's auditions, and they kind of supported one another in the voice acting industry. I thought that was a very clever thing to do, because they kind of were honing their skills. And as Jason said earlier, when I started, if you just could read lines well, you had a very good chance of getting a part at Funimation back in those days, because we were desperately looking for actors. They didn't pay enough to even go to agencies to ask for actors. But the people who are coming in now, they are sharp. They know what they're doing. They're like Alan, who literally knows everything about voice acting, and the people who they're very studied. And so your competition is fierce in this industry right now, because there's people who really, really want to do it. So you got to get that fire under you and do it too.
I usually practice at home. I do storyboarding for my own little animations.
Perfect.
Animations, and I use Flip-A-Clip, where you can record your voice, and usually I do. Sometimes I want to do fighting scenes, but also I do little comic books and voice characters.
You're on the right track.
Yes, because owning your own property, owning your own intellectual property, or your own cartoon, or your own thing is infinitely better than being on somebody else's. I'll tell you what, because it's your thing. So be creative. Keep that creative energy up. Learn to make a full animation and use your own voice, or hire us if you want.
Thank you very much. It was awesome talking to you.
Thank you.
You too. Thanks.
I hopefully had a quick question for each of you. For Jason, it sounds like you kind of got into the industry for kind of more traditional acting initially. And I was just kind of curious how your process kind of differs for voice acting versus acting with, you've got prosthetics like Satan for Preacher,
sure,
and you've got more intensive sets. Like Walking Dead, it sounds like you get maybe some visual reference material for voice acting, but how does your process kind of differ, kind of getting into those characters, and which do you prefer?
I always enjoy anime for, in any kind of voice acting, just because I think it's an important part of what I do as an actor, the overall picture. I love film. I've always loved film and television, and always wanted to be a part of that as an actor. So for me, I think one thing was when you're on set and you've got a camera pointed at you and you're mic'd up. So, it's not like we're not on mic when we're on camera. In fact, we've got two mics. Usually you've got a lavalier mic that's hidden on your costume somewhere. And then you've got a boom mic that's hanging over your head. But you've also got a camera on you, and your frame, your face in the frame is like, it's almost like if you and I were just standing almost nose to nose talking to each other. You think about when you watch television or film, you're that close to the actor, which is much closer than you ordinarily are in real life. We just typically don't get that close to each other. But in film, you're almost close enough that you can see what the character is thinking. Given the context and also the music cues, so you have to find a way to somehow do less. That's what we're fighting to do. Is we're fighting to be expressive and give a great performance, but we have to do less with our body, and it's the kind of thing that when we're in the booth. In some ways we do the opposite. It doesn't matter if I'm a ham in the booth. It doesn't matter if I'm overacting in the booth. What matters is what it sounds like. And so a lot of times I'll use my body. A lot of people reference that video that Sean and I appear in, the promo for Dragon Ball, the Battle of the Gods film, and then we're both like really getting into it, and that's all that physicality is very useful sometimes, especially in fighting scenes, but anything intense. But I'll do things in the booth physically that I would never do on camera, because if I did them on camera, it would just be like, what is this guy doing? So yeah, it's at least the work that I've done has been a lot more grounded. Now, you mentioned Satan. That's a character that was a lot of fun to play, but still had to be kind of within a realm of reality. But that was a character that we were like fighting to figure out underneath all these prosthetics how to push that performance beyond the makeup. So. But yeah, a little different technically. I always say that acting is the same, but the technical approach is what changes when you go from voiceover to film to stage even. It's a technical shift. So, yeah.
And then real quick for Chris too, it sounds like you kind of got into the industry to kind of do, some background stuff, and you just obviously have had so much success as a voice actor. And I know you're doing a lot of production and directing and stuff now too. Do you prefer one to the other? And how has that morphed, maybe even your opinion of one or the other since you started?
When I first started directing, I actually liked directing more than the acting. I enjoyed acting, but I actually liked the directing because I was getting kind of a free acting class from all the other actors, and there have been a lot of directors at Funimation who were actually engineers for a while and who have become actors since, because you're in the booth watching people do this, and you're kind of almost I get to listen to people like Laura Bailey read lines, and even at 17, 18 years old, she was phenomenal. She was so talented. And Colleen Klinkenbeard, the same. Lucy Christian. So many great actors and actresses have come through that I learned so much from. Right now, I actually kind of like the mix of all of it. I wouldn't want to direct all the time, because directing is, you're locked in that room and you can't leave, and everyone looks at you. So if you stop, you're wasting engineer money, or you're wasting actor money, you're wasting a lot of money. So you can't stop to answer an email or do anything while you're directing. And I'm kind of ADHD, so I can't focus for that long. Luckily, I have a guy named Raleigh Pickens, who is an amazing engineer and director. And he got most of his early directing experience from me going, Raleigh, I'm sorry, I got to take this call. Can you just go ahead and finish the session? Or can you just do it for the next 15 minutes? And then I come back in and go, hey, actually, I've got to write this email too. Why don't you go ahead and just do another hour? And then it was like, hey, why don't you just do super? That's right. And, it's a shame that Raleigh doesn't get as much credit as he deserves, because he's a remarkably good director. He listens to the actors really well, and he's great at coming up with so much creative stuff from the actors, while also engineering the session at the same time. It's an incredible skill. So I don't know. Yeah, I think I answered that.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
I guess I'll just ask one quick question. So are you as big as a foodie as Beerus?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Well, that unfortunately is the end of our time. So
No,
Okay.
no, we can't. I can't. It's got to go on. It's okay. No, never mind. I was going to recommend, if you all are foodies, every time we've come to town to Sacramento, I always go to the same restaurant every time I'm in town. So if you ever want to see me eating, like book a place. Sorry, I'm going to tell you all about it, and then it's going to be all booked up, and we can't get a reservation. But we went there last night. It's called. Into that place is Izakaya. It's about, I don't know, 7 minutes drive from here, and it is amazing. It's so good, and they were nominated for a James Beard Award recently, so you should go and check them out because they're incredible.
Yeah, we were there last night. That was if you're wondering what kind of food, just imagine like sort of Japanese tapas kind of fusion. You know, it's very creative. It's not, you can't just.
Yeah, it's not all sushi. It's like like last night, probably one of the best things we had was like this. It was like a deep fried meatloaf or something like that. It was ridiculous. It was so good. Anyway, there you go. Now I'm hungry. So thank you all. I'm glad we had this wonderful, productive discussion about My Hero Academia. Go beyond plus ultra. There you go. We got it out of your system. Thank you. No, thank you.
please go see them at their booth.
Thanks, bud.